Grammar. One of the most effective communication tools in grammar is degrees of comparison when we talk about adjectives. Basically, degrees of comparison is a topic which is related to adjectives, which tells you what kind of comparison you're doing between nouns. Okay, it helps you compare between nouns. Now, let's understand the various degrees of comparison and their application in usage of nouns or usage in conversation. So this particular video is about the journey of learning the lesson and also applying it in conversation as far as degrees of comparison in adjectives is concerned. Basically, there are 3 degrees of comparison: positive, comparative, and superlative. Now, what you need to understand is what are the variants and its application in conversation. First up, let's look at the variants in degrees of comparison. There are 3 primary variants. The first one being when you apply ER or EST to move from positive degree to comparative degree to superlative degree. Let's understand this. Okay. Suppose I say strong, stronger, strongest. Strong being positive, stronger being comparative, and strongest being the superlative degree. What did I do essentially? I simply applied ER and EST to get the comparative and superlative degree. Okay. Now, let's take some more examples under this category. Big, bigger, biggest, tall, taller, tallest. Okay. Or for that matter, thin, thinner, thinnest. Okay. So all of these, if you observe, there will be plenty of adjectives which will belong to this particular variant of degrees of comparison. Simply applying ER or EST to get the other forms. Now, the second variant in degrees of comparison is when you apply more and most to get your comparative and superlative forms. Now, first one, let's take an example: valuable, more valuable, most valuable. Okay. Or effective, more effective, most effective. Beautiful, more beautiful, most beautiful. So we have 2 variants so far that we have seen. First was applying ER and EST to move from positive, comparative to superlative degree. And second was applying most or applying more in front of the adjective to move from positive, comparative to superlative degree. Now, there is a third or an irregular variant in this format, which is there is no fixed format to get the comparative and the superlative degree. For example, it could be good, better, best. We never say more better. And that's the most common error that you will hear people making, when they are conversing in English. This is a more better approach. There is no phrase like more better. Better. This is a better approach because better already is the comparative form and it is not belonging to the variant where more or most is applied. Okay. So good, better, best. Or you can say bad, worse, worst. So there, this is the third variant. So first lesson that we had in degrees of comparison was positive degree, comparative degree and superlative degree, and we looked at 3 variants when we looked at this particular lesson. Now, its application in conversation, very important. Learning a grammar subject alone independently is never enough. You have to understand its application in terms of conversation or its usage. Okay. So, when we talk about so what is the primary function of an adjective? The primary function of an adjective is to describe a noun. So, if I am talking about one noun, I will use the positive degree of comparison. Okay. So, if I am talking about, say, if I am talking about myself, I'll say I am tall. Since I am not comparing myself to anybody else, I can't say I am taller or tallest. I am only talking about myself. So, I'll say I am tall. Okay. If I am talking about phone, okay, the phone or this brand is good. Okay, because I'm only talking about that particular phone, I ended up using the positive degree. So what was the lesson here? If you're talking about one noun, use the positive degree to speak, which also means that if you're speaking about two nouns and comparing two nouns, now here the degree of comparison aspect comes in. You could either use the comparative degree or the positive degree. Okay, let's understand how. Okay, now you can't use the superlative form because you're talking about two nouns. So in the same examples that I gave earlier on, if I talk about me and my sister and I compare the two of us in terms of our height, then I can say I am taller than my sister. So taller here is the comparative form. Okay, or I can say my sister is not as tall as me. So there you go, tall is the positive form. So I just demonstrated to you how the basically the positive or the comparative form can be used to compare two nouns. So here the two nouns were me and my sister. Okay, so two individuals we were comparing. Okay, and the adjective was tall, and the forms we used for comparing two nouns were comparative and positive. The first statement, as you saw, I am taller than my sister was the comparative form. And when I say the same sentence negatively, I will say my sister is not as tall as me. Now this works like a beautiful format, and just change the nouns and the adjectives and you're able to express your thought very effectively. Let me give you some examples. Okay, if you're talking about some medicines, okay, or some brands of medicines which actually help in possibly curbing a headache or curing an ailment, okay, and you're talking about how effective they are. Okay, so let's take two medicines. Okay, say it is crocin and dolo. Okay, I'm comparing two medicines which have similar functions, and I'm comparing them using the adjective effective. Okay, so effective is an adjective whose comparative form is more effective and its superlative form is most effective. Okay, so if I want to express this in sentences, because I'm only comparing to how many forms I can use positive degree and comparative degree to compare. Okay, so the statement would be dolo is more effective than crocin in curbing a headache. But if I say the same thing from crocin's point of view using the negative format, I will say crocin is not as effective as dolo in curbing a headache. So what did I do? In the first statement, I used the comparative degree, and in the second statement, I used the positive degree. Both the statements mean the same, and I'm using the first two degrees of comparison to compare two nouns. Okay, if you see, this works brilliantly like a format. Just change the nouns, change the adjectives, and you can compare any set of nouns and using the right adjectives, of course. Okay, to quickly sum up the lesson so far, if I'm talking about one noun, I can use the positive format, okay, of degree of comparison. If I'm talking about two, I could use comparative or I could use positive. Both degrees could be used. Now, if I'm talking about three or more nouns and I'm comparing them, or I'm comparing one noun to the universe it belongs to. For example, Sachin Tendulkar among all the players, or for that matter, gold, among all the metals. Okay, so automatically I'm actually eligible to use the superlative degree of comparison as well. So here I can use positive degree, comparative, or superlative when I'm comparing three or more nouns with each other, or one noun to its universe. Okay, let's understand how. So if I'm trying to say that take the adjective cool, cool, cooler, coolest. Now the name which pops up in your head when you say cool, cooler, coolest is MS Dhoni. Okay, so suppose I say that Dhoni is a cool captain, because I'm only talking about Dhoni alone here. So Dhoni is a cool captain. But suppose I was comparing Dhoni with Sachin Tendulkar, then I would say, or probably let's take a slightly more aggressive player. Let's take Virat Kohli. So in the positive way, the aggression, of course. So Dhoni as against Virat Kohli is Dhoni is a cooler captain as against Virat Kohli. Okay, or Virat Kohli is not as cool as Dhoni as a captain. Here we are talking about the temperament, of course. Okay, and suppose I compare Dhoni to all the players. Okay, so I can say this in three ways, because now I'm eligible to use the superlative form also. As what I did, I used one noun Dhoni and I'm comparing it to the entire universe of players. Okay, or of cricketers. Like Dhoni is the coolest captain, okay, of all times, which means I've compared him to all the cricketers. The coolest. Why did I use the? Because I'm using the superlative form. So this is a thumb rule. Whenever you're using the superlative degree of comparison, use the. So Dhoni is the coolest captain of all times, or you can say Dhoni is a cooler captain compared to other cricketers, or no other captain is as cool as Dhoni. So if you see, all these three formats of sentences are fine when you're comparing one against a universe, or you're comparing one against three or more than three nouns. Okay, let's take one more example and understand the format of usage of superlative, comparative, and positive. Okay, here the example that I can think of is, say, travel. Okay, and the adjective. So if I'm comparing a car and a flight, okay, and possibly I'm comparing a flight against other modes of transport to travel. Okay, so the adjective which comes to my mind is fast. Okay, so clearly the positive degree is fast, comparative faster, and superlative fastest. Okay, so flight is the fastest mode, okay, to travel, or flight is or you can say flight is faster than other modes of transport to travel, or no other mode of transport is as fast as flight to travel. Again, the same format of sentences, and we used the adjective fast, faster, fastest, because you were comparing the noun flight against the entire universe of modes of travel. Okay, listen to this video intently over and over again, because the concept has been beautifully explained and very much in detail. All you need to do is understand where these different degrees of comparison come into play. That is the positive degree, the comparative degree, and the superlative degree, and apply it as per the number of nouns you are comparing, and you would have got this concept spot on.